Whenever you guys are ready, you can start.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Save Currents. I'm joined here today with Carolyn Alvord, and we're going to talk a little bit about the vital electric water filters that we provide on the river trips. And Vital is a company based out of Prescott, Arizona, and we might be talking to Kevin Greif a little bit later. But today, Carolyn's gonna show you how this filter works and give you some do's and don'ts and some recommendations. So thanks for stopping in. Well, while you get started, I'm gonna fill up some water for you.
Perfect. All right, folks, here we go. This is our water filter case right here, and it's 20 mils. We'll call these 20 mils, and this is our battery box that we have here that's going to run this water filter for us. This is also probably the most sensitive thing you're going to have, fragile thing you're going to have on your trip. So you have to be very careful when you're handling this. So you don't want to drop it, you don't want to leave it out. If it's a winter trip, you don't want it to freeze. There are some components in here that will be damaged, and we're going to go over that as I take it out, and I'll point those out to you as we go along. One thing you want to remember on these water filters is that they are pre-primed. We prime them at the shop, so you don't have to do that on the river. It always stays primed for the whole trip. There are holes we've drilled in the bottom of the box so that you don't have to worry about the water that's going to leak out. So it comes right out of its little box here. We send it along with this bucket, which is our short bucket that we have here, and it's made specifically for this water filter. Make sure that this bucket is always full of water. So we have our battery box, just has to be in close proximity to your wires. These are the contents. They're all laminated and written on the inside. We have some parts that we'll go over if you need to take this apart and clean it. We have our water wizard, which is pretty much just like a liquid alum. It works a little bit quicker, and you're going to enjoy having this if you have any type of silty water. We have a perfectly good, brand new green scrubby. We have a spare pump in here, so if your pump for whatever reason goes bad, you do have a spare pump in there. You also have a spare ceramic filter, which will open up once we go to the inside of these, but this is one spare filter that you have in here. And we have a small container of bleach. As you take the wire out, you'll notice that on the battery box, this connection has a little nub on it here. And your connection from the filter itself has a little clip. So you want to put, it only goes together one way, and the clip and the little nub go together. So you're going to plug these in together, and you'll hear the pump starting. Now this connection clips, so if you push that in, you don't need to hold that at all. You can just let that be free. All right, our water is flowing out continuously here. The thing you want to be very careful of is that your water does not go down below the pump. So the pump needs to be submerged in the water, so it's great to have a helper. You can do this by yourself, but it's always great, and Scott's a great helper here. And adding water.
And
when
not
you're adding
aerate.
the water, you want to add the water to the back, not right over the pump. All right, the water right now is flowing great, but if you do have a problem, and it's usually a water bubble, you'll hear the pump making a different kind of a noise, and the water flow coming out of your hose is going to diminish quite a bit. That's the flow, that's the noise. So that's the flow from an air bubble in the water pump. So it's very easily fixed. Unplug your electricity here. You're just going to reach your hand down in, pull off the pump, shake it underwater, keeping it in the water, push it right back in, plug your pump back in, and that should take care of the water bubble problem. So these are two different components here on the pump. We have one that's connected to the filter, and this pump is separate. You just twist it a little, it comes right out. Okay, and this blue section that you're looking at right here, this is where the water is drawn in from the bucket that you're using. So it does not get drawn in from the top here. This fits right into the hose on the filter, and the water is drawn in from the blue tip down here. So you want to always make sure that this pump is submerged in water. That's why you're keeping this thing full. And when you have to fix your air bubble that makes that high-pitched noise, it comes right out just like I have it out now You shake it underwater and then put it right back in. It slides right back into its home, right there. So very simple. One of the most important things is that you use clear water all the time. Once silt gets into that pump and goes through these filters, it dirties up the filters, and we're going to have to work on the filters taking it apart. So if you can't get clear water from the river, you're going to try to find some side streams. If you can't find clear side streams, we're going to either settle water or use our water wizard. If the water does slow down and the pump seems to be running fine, it's probably your filters are dirty. I'm going to unhook the electricity and show you how to clean the filters as best you can on the river. Inside your can, you'll have a wrench, and this wrench is to take off these two plastic canisters one at a time. Inside this can, you also have two laminated instructions here. One tells you about the water filter, the other one is troubleshooting. So everything I'm giving you in this little demo here is written on these laminated cards that come with the water filter and the wrench. These canisters are on very tight, so sometimes it takes a little bit of elbow grease to get these off, and you might even need assistance. So you might think that they're stuck on, they're not, but they are air sealed on, so they do take a little bit of oomph to get them off. I'm laying this down, and again, you do not want to do this in the sand. You're trying to keep the sand out of it. So you lay it down and you'll twist it and you'll hear it give. And I twist it a few times just so it's easier to take off by hand. Same thing with the second one. Lay it on its side, pull it to get it loose. It's easier for me to get these canisters, and remember, keep these out of the sand. Very important. And we're going to show you the filter system here. So we have drained these from the water. When you take these off, the water will flow out, but these come off, both canisters. So you have a paper filter here that needs to be cleaned with already filtered water. So just rinse it as best you can, keeping it out of the sand. And this is your ceramic filters. So you have 6 ceramic tubes here that are very fragile. If these break, that's a problem. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to clean these candles one by one. Then these are a little tricky, but once you get the first one started, the other ones are easy. It's just grabbing that first one and getting it to turn so you can take it out. So we have one candle out. We're going to take one more out just as a demo. They come out easily, and you just want to be careful you don't drop them. They break quickly. With a clean bucket of water, not the short bucket that you're using to filter your water, or you can do this right in the river. So there's no problem going down to the river, right on the riverside, and cleaning these ceramic cylinders. I hold the candle and then I just twist back and forth. And you'll be able to see the difference as I'm cleaning it. That water coming off of here is dirty. So here's one that is unclean and clean. So now you can compare and see the difference. And you might not think that's a big deal, but when you're filtering water, this difference in color is huge. So it'll slow down the filter, it'll slow down your output of water coming in. So you want to make sure that you keep your candles nice and clean. And again, if you're constantly using clear water, this won't happen. They'll stay white if you're using perfectly clear water. If the river's nice and clear or a side stream, those are the best rather than using silty water in the river. If you use silty water in the river, you're definitely going to have to clean. And then you're going to fit it right back into its spot. So you have 6 of those. You're going to go around and clean each one individually. So it's to your advantage to try to use clear water so you don't have to do this. But each one can be taken out and then screwed right back in. And it's just hand tight. You don't want to make it too tight that it's going to get stuck in there. So you want that hand tightened in there. Now, if there's a problem, if you're cleaning it and for some reason it drops. If it drops, that's okay because we have a spare. You have one spare right here, and we're going to open this up and show you. And your spare ceramic filter is right here. So you have one spare filter. So You've broken one, you replace it with this. You need to unscrew the broken part, get rid of the broken pieces. Now, if for some reason you drop another one, or say somebody drops this can and two break, if you've replaced one candle and you have another candle that's broken, you'll see in here we have given you two yellow little knobs. So if you've broken two, you replace one with our spare, and then your second one, you undo the broken one and screw this into the base of your holder. What that does is it'll work, and you can break up to 3 total candles, and it will still work fine. It might be a little bit slower, but it will work. If you break more than 3 of these candles, then you're down to boiling and bleaching your water for your trip, which is not fun. So try to be very careful with these water filters. You also have some O-rings, okay, 2 large O-rings. The O-rings fit right down inside the lid, okay, and they need to go back in. Before you put these in, when you're replacing all your pieces here, you need to use what we call magic lube. Magic lube looks like a little Vaseline. It's a little lubricant for the gasket that helps it adhere to there and helps seal the canister on. So it needs the magic lube to get a good tight fit. Okay, now we're going to put our water filter back together. So what you want to remember is that when you're putting those candles back in, you have them all in order, and there is an order for your filters. The pump side, where the pump comes out, is going to get the paper filter, always. The paper filter goes in by the pump. The ceramic filter goes in the hose side. You have to remember about your O-ring, and you want that lubed up. The O-ring can go back in as long as it's in good shape. If there's a crack or a split or it's ripped, that's why we give you the spares. And then you're going to place it inside the top of the canister. So you want to get that O-ring totally down all the way around. So just run your finger around it a few times. Make sure it's pushed all the way down in there. Then you can put your paper filter back in there. Canister goes on. And we're going to hand tighten it at first, and then we're going to use the wrench to tighten it up. So that's just hand tight. Now your ceramic filters is the same thing. The O-ring needs to be magic lubed. Then you're going to get your candles in here. The candles go in place. Make sure your O-ring is lubed well and pushed down. The black end goes up right into your candle area here, just like that. And you're going to take your other canister and screw that one on. Once you have those hand tight, you're going to get your wrench, put your wrench on, and make sure you tighten these fairly tight. And you want these tight. If they're not tight enough, they're going to leak. And if that O-ring is not in there correctly and pushed all the way down, it will also leak. If you start this and put it back in your bucket and you're starting it, it has to prime itself, so it's going to take a little while, so you're going to need an extra bucket to fill this up, because these canisters both have to fill up with water, and it'll take more than one bucket to do that. You can put it right back into your short bucket, and it's going to end up priming itself once you turn it on and connect it to the electricity over here. And if you see these canisters leaking, they can leak a lot. If it's leaking a lot, you'll have to take the canisters off and reset your O-ring. You'll have to put more magic lube on there. So the thing is, your O-ring has to be pushed down completely flat inside. If there's a small leak after you do that, it's fine, because the amount of water that's leaking out is nothing compared to the flow coming out of the hose. So don't worry if it comes out with a little leak, but if it's a bad leak, you'll know the difference. it needs to be taken apart again and re-lubed and put together. So that is how we clean our filters on the river. So we've just filled up all our water jugs. We've topped off everybody's water. We're breaking down camp or wherever you are that you've made your water, and we're going to put this away. You're going to put your wrench back in your box. This water filter stays primed all the time. So you want to just pick it up out of the water short bucket and put it in. You don't want to drop it. Now it's going to be a lot heavier. It's full of water. So just gently put it in there, making sure everything is tucked in. One of the big things we have to be really careful of is this electrical cord. So a lot of times people get in a rush and they just put the top right on. You want to be careful of that. Once you're finished filtering your water, you want to make sure all your components go back into here. You can see the terminals are hooked up. These stay hooked up. There's no maintenance to this at all, except for the fact you want to keep it as clean as possible and dry as possible. This wire is tucked in so it doesn't get pinched and compromised on the side here as you're putting everything away. Make sure your extra filter is in there. Make sure all your components to this box are inside before you close it, and make sure that wire is tucked in. A big thing that you want to remember is that if you do have a flip on the river, which does happen from time to time, please just check the boxes after everything is righted and everybody's calmed down a bit. Check those boxes and make sure they're in good shape. No water inside boxes. Thank you. If you're on a winter trip, you want to make sure that you keep this from freezing. This goes down in a hatch or on the floor of your boat where the river is running underneath it and the river never freezes. So this won't freeze. But if it's up on the seat or if it's on the shore, there's a good chance that it will freeze and those candles will break inside. I can't tell you enough how important it is to have this on your trip. You're going to need this multiple times during your trip. So remember, it is probably the most fragile thing you have on your trip, that if it breaks, there's a big consequence involved. So remember to treat it with kid gloves.
My name is Kevin Greif. I'm the owner of Vital Water Products. When I started, we used to use the Katadyn hand pump, and I've got a little bit of background in plumbing and construction, and we were having trouble finding people that wanted to pump water. It wasn't nearly as exciting as most people thought it might be. And so we started playing around with alternatives to the old Katadyn expedition pumps. It had to be pretty durable because working with guides and being a guide, I know how rough things get handled down there. And I also wanted to make it simple enough that you could keep the filter going on the river. There's some redundancy in the system. The reason that there are two filter elements or two canisters is that the other polyester filter, which is more like a household filter, kind of a pleated element, is actually fine enough that it probably would do everything you need to have happen to keep your drinking water safe without the ceramics. So ultimately the company Dalton started making the ceramic filter that we're still using, and it uses 6 candles, ceramic candles, and a manifold. And the key to that filter working is the amount of surface area. So the ability to use a fairly low pressure pump and having a lot of surface area makes that whole system work. We tried to use a partner steel water filter early on before I even started making them, and there were a couple things that I noticed with the partner filter. One was, at that time, I think they were using batteries that were made for uninterruptible power supplies for things like computers. And those batteries are like a car battery, and they're basically made to run at full charge all the time. If you take that kind of a battery and put a load on it and run it any length of time, the battery discharges to the point where it actually does some damage when the battery's charged back up again. So there are batteries that are deep cycle that are made for things like mobility scooters or even wheelchairs. And those batteries use a glass mat, a fiberglass mat, and rather than a liquid electrolyte, they use a paste. And they plate up more evenly when they're recharged, and that's why they're better for the kind of application that we're using them in. So the battery that we use is a 35 amp hour glass mat, and that was sized originally large enough so that if somebody forgot to charge the battery after a trip, there was enough capacity left in the battery to actually run a second trip. And as the batteries age, that ability probably diminishes to some extent. But the other advantage is those batteries will cycle a lot more times before you have to replace them. So if you basically keep the batteries charged when they come back and send them out, in theory, those batteries should be getting somewhere over 250 cycles before you have a problem with the battery itself. So they're much more durable. The other thing that Partner was doing when I was looking at those filters, is they were using a UV light in there, and UV lights are used in municipal plants for basically to deal with the viruses. The problem with UV lights in an environment like the Grand Canyon is multiple. One is if the glass tube in the UV light gets clouded, the UV light doesn't have enough exposure time to the water, and you don't know that. The other thing is if the UV light stops working, then you're not getting any benefit from the UV, and you think you might be. And then the biggest issue was that the National Park Service doesn't give you any credit for using a UV light to deal with viruses. So basically you're running something that may or may not be working and using up battery life in the process. So it didn't really make much sense to me to spend the money on that, and since there was limited benefit from that system. The other thing that Partner was doing was they were using a much larger pump. They were using a diaphragm pump. And they're nice pumps, but again, they have a much higher power draw. So in terms of the battery consumption, they were going, and I think they still are going through more energy to filter the same amount of water. The ceramics are probably the weakest link in the filter. It's really important that you don't freeze them. The other thing too is when you're transporting them, at least in my experience, it's better to transport them, say on the Diamond Creek Road with water in the canister. And if you drain that thing and put it back in the box, they're more likely to come back with broken candles. The candles are fragile to some extent. It's a ceramic material. As they get cleaned, you're actually taking ceramic material off the outside of the candle so they get thinner. And at some point, they're going to need to be replaced if they don't break. But what the manufacturer has said regarding replacement is you can run them until they break. And so you'll find that some of those candles may be fairly thin. They're still doing the job, but if you break them, you're passing untreated water through the system. The only thing that you have to really be aware of is that the filters they're not fine enough to take out viruses. And that's why it's really important that after you run the water through the filter, that you treat it properly with some bleach. So we do have a website. It's vitalwaterproducts.com. There's information there about the filters. and they're readily available. The Grand Canyon filters, typically I build them as the orders come in, so it's not something that I always have on the shelf. And in part that's so that the batteries we send out are fresh when they go out, rather than being on the shelf for any length of time. Saba is one of the outfitters that buys the parts that the filter was designed for. So I really appreciate the fact that they're maintaining the redundancy of the system and providing equipment to you folks that will work for you.
And action.
Thanks, Scott. Welcome to Saba Currents. Is that right? Oh, welcome to I forgot what I was supposed to say. Today we're going to be talking about Nitro says it's fine water. He's a good boy. Cut.